Good to
Here
see
we
you
are.
guys. How are we feeling? Oh, sorry. Let me do Jay's thing real quick. Live from Fondren Library on the fifth floor of SMU's campus. I don't
Just
know. I can't do it. Sorry, Jay. When you watch this, you can be disappointed in me, but
like calling
we're
in to the Fondren Library meeting rooms.
there. We go. Calling in to Fondren Library. So, how are we feeling? I mean, for those of you that don't know, I mean, most of you probably have seen the last episode where you saw Joel Booth come in, but Joel is joining us today, guest guest and fellow Mustang mooter. Um, Joel, great to have
Yeah.
you here.
Thanks, guys. Good to be tapped in off the bench again. It's always a pleasure. It's crazy because, we were just hanging out last weekend in Charlotte, but it kind of feels like forever ago almost in terms of SMU football because there's like so much is happening since
So much
then.
is happening.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, well, since we're gonna have a limited amount of time, but do we how do real quick, how do we feel, kind of post game, and then let's talk about the playoffs selection where they let us in anyway.
Yeah, I can start. I mean, I think we covered a lot of it in the post game podcast last week, but um, during the game, I think like at halftime, as a group, we were just kind of like, if we're not in the playoffs after this performance, that makes sense. Like we're not going to be upset. Don't deserve it if after that first half. But then I think the resolve that the team showed in the second half and coming back to tie it up in the final seconds and to lose on a record field goal for that kicker, who's a great kicker, by the way. But um, a lot of things went wrong at the very end. But all that to say, like I feel like by the end of that, we all proved that we were a playoff caliber team. Um, and really, it was just SMU Alabama was all anyone in the country cared about. So it's
Mm.
really interesting to see SMU all of a sudden like vaulted into the limelight of like national college football.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, and
funny.
I
What?
think it was sorry, Yonnic. It was nice because it was kind of stressful night slash morning. But then we kind of started to see the money lines. I mean, the betting lines moving further towards us, and kind of felt some confidence there. But I mean, my heart was. I know Rhett Lashley talked about how they built that suspense and the drama, but man, my heart was pumping when we were waiting for that last one to come up, and I was so relieved. So I definitely think we earned it. I think. I've heard so much talk about Bama's best wins. How about their worst losses? I mean, they were
Mhm.
they were terrible. They didn't deserve to get in. I mean, it's a debate, I guess, but I'm glad they did the right thing. So I'm super excited.
Yeah, we were. I mean, you guys had some early flights out the next morning or that night for
5 a.m.
Yonnic. Yeah. But yeah, that Sunday, me, Brian, Walker, and Jay were the last of the group still left in Charlotte. So we went to Buffalo Wild Wings in downtown to watch the show. Um,
Hmm.
and yeah, it was interesting because like, the whole time they're showing it, they have Saban on as a commentator, and just hyping Alabama up. And really the big conversation is strength of schedule, which I totally understand, but it was kind of infuriating in the broadcast that they were showing pretty much every stat except for key losses, which is
Yeah,
a huge part of the conversation. Like you can't omit that a team
At
that
least you're not
has
supposed
lost
to.
to, yeah, at least you're not supposed to. And it was, I mean, it was so blatant. And so they're showing like key wins and of course Alabama playing in the SEC where 70% of the league is starting the season ranked. They have a lot more key wins. Um, but I think it's a fair conversation point in terms of like the confidence you would have in a team toppling a higher seeded team. But at the same time, like you have to show the losses to show that the weaknesses of the team as well.
Yeah. I mean, I've said this for the last, year ever since they've expanded the playoffs. I don't think that any team beyond the top four deserve to be in. So I think that SMU and Bama don't deserve to be in. But what I will say is that
That's
Bama
fair.
deserves it way less. So I think that was clear. The other thing you got to think about is, all right, so Bama wasn't good enough to play in the championship game. Let's say they had played in the championship game, and let's say they played either Georgia or Texas. in Georgia in a rematch, Texas. I don't think they played Texas this year, but um, like, do you think they would have won that game? Like, maybe. I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
they weren't
I
good
think
enough to play in it, so
right.
like, who
And that's the
knows?
thing. It's like we can have a conversation all day about like, oh, they are they capable of being, would it be a more competitive game? Are they the better team? All this stuff. But also like you didn't even get to your conference championship. And I feel like that's something that like as SMU fans, we all kind of or I've heard a common sentiment that like you don't really deserve anything unless you're a conference champion. And I kind of really like that about the current
Yeah.
playoff structure is like if we were in or out, it there were people that'd be happy about it, there'd be people that are upset about it, and you just got to live with the decision at the end of the day. To that point, I saw a tweet this past week. I actually wasn't on Twitter, but before we left Charlotte, Brian got me set up, and now I follow all the SMU accounts. But there was a tweet from not Craig James at CJK5H
Mm,
underscore SMU, for
not
those
Kirk
that know.
James.
Yeah, but he said made the playoff, won the regular season conference title, which I don't think that's actually a thing. So we'll keep going. Kicked the crap out of TCU and FSU, showed we belong at this level. Anything else from this point forward is a bonus. We're playing with house money, which I think is like exactly how SMU feels.
Totally.
Like this season, regardless of what happens, is a success. Like we, only a few of us thought that we would be in this position.
Yeah.
So no
Dude,
matter the
I don't know
outcome,
how
like
many
we're
did
just
think
happy
we
to
were
be
going to be
here.
in it. Yeah.
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 I thought an ambitious year was 9-3, and then half
Right.
the guys on the podcast thought 10-2, which still wouldn't have been in the conference championship. So it's like
And
hard
that, and
to
we definitely did that with like red and blue colored glasses as well. Like even when I said 10-2, I was like, I mean, I doubt we're actually going to go 10-2. So, but something I thought that was interesting too is I kind of been hating on Ward Manuel, who's the playoff chair or whatever. But something good that he said, he was talking to somebody. I've listened to like a lot of interviews and people talking on YouTube about the games and stuff. It might have been Rich Eisen, I don't remember for sure, but they were asking him about strength of schedule, and he said, I mean, if it was solely based on strength of schedule, like we could have just lined up the top 12 and just put them in. Like that's the thing. Like, do we honestly think that Alabama is better than SMU would beat them? They probably would be favored. But if we're going on who we think is best, and there's no point in playing the games, we might as well just have the playoff as the whole season, and everybody else can just stay home and watch. So I kind of am more in favor of the model of like most deserving above like who you think is the best team. Because again, like they have the better roster and stuff, but that doesn't always translate to wins. We know that, and so I'm glad that they set the precedent they did.
Yeah.
Super excited.
And to that point, Ben, like the whole strength of schedule thing, like that's been a real big point that Alabama's been making. And it's interesting because their strength of schedule is held together by their SEC conference schedule. And so, and then there's this narrative that they're putting out post not being selected, saying like, hey, well, now we have to rethink our non-conference schedule because of the precedent that this sets. Here's the non-conference schedule they played this year. Western Kentucky, South Florida, Wisconsin, who's a bad Wisconsin team, and then Mercer.
Wisconsin team that missed their first bowl game in over 20 years. So it's probably the worst
Yes.
Wisconsin team we've seen in our lifetime.
And then Mercer. Mercer is an FCS school. So it's like, what are we talking about here? That your out of conference schedule didn't like it's all about the conference schedule that's holding it together for you.
Yeah, they
And
lost three
that's
games in the
something that
conference, so it's
yeah,
silly.
exactly. And so,
Well,
and I think also at the end of the day, like schools don't control their conference schedule. And you can, I mean, now you have a little more control in the conference you're in, but that's a long-term strategy thing. That's not something you can just strategize season to season to have a more competitive schedule. So I think it's kind of ridiculous that that's such a talking point. Just focus on winning the games you have on your docket, and if you win all your games, then there's not going to be a reason to keep you out of the playoff.
hmm
Yeah,
I'm
and
hope
again,
I'm
sorry, I was just gonna
hoping
say one
that
thing and then you
oh,
can
go for it.
go.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was just gonna say it, and don't lose to the worst Oklahoma team in 20 years. Don't get dominated. That's it.
Or
Go
at least
ahead.
score more than 3 points.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure you can get a touchdown, right? Um yeah, I think part of the reason for the decision, and we should probably move on to the game pretty soon after this. But part of the part of I think the playoff committee's like thought process is, I'm going to create a hypothetical here, is that they uh they have to be careful about just rewarding teams that like Alabama, because if they did, then they not only do they throw out all their talk about the non-conference or about the conference championships and basically say it's actually a danger for you to get into the conference championship. They also, on top of it, there's all this talk leading up into this game where if Bama gets in, everyone's going to only schedule, cupcake games like Mercer, like all these guys. And so, the playoff committee had to set a precedent here. And, I think they made the right one, but I, my one dig at the playoff committee is that I think that these automatic buys for the top conferences, like I like having conference champions in there because, at this point we're just kind of everyone gets in. And so if everyone's going to get in, we should still like reward teams that, don't have the opportunity to play better schedules. Um, and so because of that, I like that, but it's weird that we could beat Penn State and we would be favored over Boise.
Yeah.
Clemson could beat Texas and they would be favored over, was it Arizona State? Like the second
Yeah,
round bye would be an underdog, sometimes by multiple touchdowns against whoever's going to win that game.
I understand that. Frankly, I disagree. Like, I actually really like the structure right now of emphasizing the value of being a conference champion. I think if that is at the expense of a really good team having a tougher path to the national championship, I'm okay with that. Because at the end of the day, I think the best team's going to win anyways, even if it's a tougher path to get there. I just like that the current system incentivizes a team to be motivated to perform well throughout the regular season. Like, it gives the lower conferences something to really strive for. Um, so
Yeah.
I see both sides of it, but I think personally I just lean towards the current system.
Yeah, I can definitely see both sides too, because I've heard people say, like, I definitely think automatic bids 1,000%. I can see where they probably will end up changing like the automatic buys and might just do the top four seeds, which I think could make sense. But at the same time, I like what they talked to Dan Lanning, because I think Oregon has probably the most difficult of the four teams. And he just said, like, I mean, if we want to win a national championship, like we have to beat big teams. That's not exactly what he said, but something like that. He was basically like we'll take on the challenge. If we're good enough, we're gonna beat them. So I kind of like that attitude as well. But yeah, it's definitely a good conversation, but I'm just glad. I'm glad we're in there. So
Yeah.
Okay.
Do y'all
Well,
want
we'll
to?
call it there and let's move on to, let's briefly touch on, Preston Stone. He's transferring, but he's going to stay on with us, through the playoffs. High integrity guy. He's been, SMU's biggest cheerleader. You see him going crazy on the sidelines, even though
yeah.
he's probably in one of the most frustrating positions to be in as a quarterback.
Yeah, I think I want to highlight kind of the statement that Preston put out because I think it says a lot about his character, and I think it's something that's quite uncommon in college football today. Towards the end, closing out his statement, he said, "The goal set out at the beginning of this season was to win a national championship, and that goal is still within reach. I plan on keeping my commitment to my teammates to finish the remainder of this season as a Mustang and doing whatever I can to help us win it all." And that is, I mean, that's awesome. But it's also, I think, kind of to the detriment of maybe what's best for him in the next step. And I think this is like a real sacrifice he's making in terms of focusing on SMU rather than what's happening in the portal because we're already seeing, the Tulane quarterback, Duke quarterback. We're seeing all these players already committing to their programs for next year and getting a head start on filling those roster spots. So I think it says a lot about Preston's character. Um, and I think the whole like all SMU fans are just kind of like in full support of him. I think the way he's carried himself, his I don't it's just really admirable.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I I mean, I think he's 23 if I remember correctly. I'm 26, and I don't think I don't think I'd be as mature as he is. So I think it'd be so easy just to quit on your team, much less continue after the season is over. And I mean, um, I do think, I don't know for sure how it works, but I think he is still going through the recruitment process because I think he's still in the portal, but I think like we're letting him stay.
Mhm.
and he's finishing out his degree and stuff. So I don't know exactly what that looks like,
Yeah, I
but
don't think he's like hanging up on calls on coaches for sure,
yeah.
but at least like maintaining the focus on the team is very nice.
Yeah, and I really hope, just because, like you said, he's been an amazing leader. I really hope that he is able to find a spot where he can be a starter for a year, and maybe he can go to the league as, later round pick or something. That would be awesome for him. But yeah, what a great guy, man. I mean, just yeah,
Yeah, Rhett Lashley actually retweeted his statement and said, "The absolute best leader and ambassador for SMU, forever a Mustang, and let's go to the finish job. Love you, man." Um, which is really cool to see, like just the relationship that Preston's fostered within the program even leads to the coach, really going to bat for him in the portal, which is cool. I think I also want to highlight that, like, I think Preston Stone really believed in SMU before anyone else did. Like his recruiting class was 2021. He recruited in 2020, um, or he committed in 2020 during the Sonny Dykes era. And he was a 4-star with legit offers, and he chose an American Conference SMU local team, and then stuck by them. And even whenever he was a backup to um, like the incumbent starters, yeah, it's just, I think it's been a quite a journey for him, and I'm excited to see what's next for him.
Yeah, good stuff. Well, great. Then I guess the next thing on that we need to talk about is what about Scott Simons? I mean, basically led
huge.
SMU's defense to probably our best defensive season in 40 years. I don't know if that's actually like accurate in terms of stats, but it felt like the best
Yeah.
SMU season in my lifetime at least. So yeah, big win for SMU, big win for Scott.
Yeah, I listened to him. I didn't actually know he's from the Dallas area. I think he's from Hurst, if I remember correctly, the Dallas-Fort Worth area, something like that. But he interviewed this week, and they talked about how this has been his home, and even though he didn't go to SMU, like everybody's welcomed him a lot, and he just wants to be around, which I think is just really cool. Again, it feels like our program and the culture that they've built is kind of more old school in the sense that, like we talk about, there's not a lot of loyalty in college football nowadays, but it feels like everybody wants to be there. They're not like, this isn't a stepping stone. Like they really want to plant roots and like have their families be here. And so, and that's just personally, that's outside of all of the things he's done on the field, which I mean, nobody could turn around that defense. I mean, think about when we were in school. I mean, that defense was terrible. So like he deserves all the credit in the world, and he deserves to be one of the highest paid defensive coordinators in college football, which I believe he is. I don't think we'll see a number since it's a private school, but that is a massive win because I mean, I heard, Florida State was courting him. I'm sure there were a lot more than just that. And for him to stay is kind of shows, the trajectory our program is on. So yeah, it's super exciting.
Yeah, the extension's awesome. I am curious kind of like what it would mean if a head coach position opens up for him, because I do think that's in the cards, and if not, if it wasn't going to be this season, it would be the next couple of years. Um, so I don't know. I'm just curious, like, we don't get the details of the contract since we're a private university, but I wonder if there's any kind of like maybe buyout or something in if he ever wants to take that next step. But it is good to see, like, at least on paper, the commitment to SMU. And it's awesome knowing that, like, if the coaches perform well, money's not going to be a reason they leave. And it's kind of really nice to have that assurance.
Yeah. Good stuff. Let's see. Okay. Let's I mean I agree with everything you guys are saying. Love Coach Simons. I think that, if we get another, couple good years out of him, before he moves on to a head coaching position, I mean, I think that's just be wonders for the program. I think the SMU's program's in a really unique spot of, being a relevant team to becoming a contender on the national stage. And, we got to see whether it's a flash in the pan or whether it's got long-term success. We're set up right now for long-term success. And that's really good for the program. I am concerned if we have one bad year, it could derail the whole thing right now because it's kind of like when you're making, laying concrete, you got a lot of wet concrete right here. You got a great foundation, poured. And if we give it some time, we give it a couple of years of just high end success, it'll solidify and we'll be a program that everyone wants to go to because we're in a great market, we're a great school, and football's in our, pedigree, and we can just bring that back. But, if that concrete gets messed up right now, if we have a 5-7 year next year, then we're going to be the TCU of a few years back where it's like, oh, that was a flash man. It was a one-hit wonder. They're never going to actually be a contender. And so in order for us to not have that, we've done 2 good years, which is great. But you really need probably to string 4 or 5 good years because Clemson was in this position before they had the Natties. They're kind of a mid team, and then boom, they're on the national stage because they had like 5 straight years of just title contention. And so we really need to have, I think it's 4 or 5 years where, we're a 10-win team 4 or 5 years in a row. And that's going to put us for recruits and the long-term success and everything, that's going to put us in the long-term conversation of being a football powerhouse again.
Yeah, and I think coaching consistency is the biggest determining factor of that foundation that
100%.
you're talking about. Like, if
100%.
we lose a key coach, like, I mean, I don't think Lashley's going anywhere. I sure hope not. But if we had like another Sonny Dykes situation in which we got really lucky landing Lashley, or a coordinator leaving like Simons, and whoever comes in to fill them just can't keep up with the pace that we were at before, like that could be
Yeah.
catastrophic.
Which is why I think, like I said, we've had 2 really good years where this year's better than last year, but last year was an 11-win season. If we have 2 more of those, like Scott Simons, if we can just keep him for 2 more years and have an elite defense for 2 more years, Lashley runs our offense, with those 2 together, 2 more years, I think is totally doable. And yeah, we just got to hope that they're bought in the way that we all are. And, from everything coach says, I think they are. It really looks like they are. Okay. Now the moment that everyone's probably really wanting to talk about, which is how are we feeling about Penn State? The Nittany, I don't know if I say that right, but the Nittany Lions, having a great year, probably their best year in the last 10. How are we feeling? It's a whiteout game. That's another thing. It's going to be a whiteout game for them.
I mean, I really don't know what to expect because I think the environment is going to be unlike anything that SMU's faced in a really long time. Like, this is a legitimate, like, American college football environment stadium where the stadium's vibrating. And I know that after the Clemson game, coach had said that he didn't think the players were nervous. It was just like the bad start was just a bad string of plays. And I largely agree with that because of the composure they showed as the game progressed.
Oh yeah, we were the better team. I was talking with somebody about this
Absolutely.
afterwards. Like everyone that wasn't related to SMU that I talked to, they said, yeah, like they were the better team. They just had a bad start.
Yeah. And I mean, that
Which is
was
what it
in
is.
what was supposed to be a neutral site, but really didn't feel like a neutral site.
No.
This is as a way of feel as it's gonna be. And so it's kind of gonna be like the ACC championship game times 100, I think.
Yeah.
So I'm really interested to see how the players respond to that, and I really don't know.
Yeah, I mean the whiteout game 5 years ago against Michigan State. This is the famous video that you can go find on YouTube, where Penn State's crowd is so loud. Michigan on the opening play of the game, they couldn't hear the play calls from their coach, and they actually had to call a timeout because the crowd they had to burn a timeout before the game started, essentially, because the crowd is so loud at Penn State. I mean, that's the crowd that we're going into. It's a top 10 stadium in the country, top 10 crowd for sure, probably top 5.
What's funny is like when they white out, they wear blue. So like we'll probably wear white, which I just think is kind of funny. But yeah, we'll see how the weather is. But I think I have a huge question about who Penn State really is, which to be fair, I have about almost any team. Seems like most teams are very inconsistent up and down. I mean, they barely beat Minnesota, where they played well with Oregon. They almost lost to USC. So I think there's definitely like there's room there. I think obviously, I mean, I'm sure everybody will talk about this. The biggest thing I'm concerned about is their tight end, who is incredible, Tyler Warren. Um, he's their best receiver, over 1,000 yards, and I think the big thing too that's going to be difficult for us is I'm sure a lot of those matchups are going to be on linebackers. And say what you will about linebackers, they're very good, but they're not very big. I mean, I think most of them are like 5'11", ish. Like they're not very tall. He's 6'6". He's going to be a matchup nightmare. I mean, for probably anybody, but we don't have a ton of size. I still love our linebackers. I think they're very good. But I think that'll be huge. I'm interested to see Drew Aller because he was really not very good before, but I also don't think they had a very good offensive coordinator. The one they have this year, he came over from Kansas. He's very, very good. So I think that's why you're seeing them be a little bit better on offense. But I'm interested to see. I feel like, I mean, he played okay against Oregon. He had 2 interceptions. I'm interested to see like what they really are. And I think maybe the adversity we saw against Clemson could be good for us in the sense that if things start going bad, it's like we've seen this before, like literally 2 weeks ago. We were here and we fought back and we know we can do it. So I think maybe that's a good wake up call because we kind of had skated through for a while before that game. So yeah, that's kind of how I'm
Yeah,
feeling right now.
if I could jump in on Tyler Warren, I mean, yeah, he clearly their best player. I just saw today that he was number 7 in Heisman voting to finish out the season, which is
Yeah,
pretty
for
nuts
tight
for
end,
a tight
yeah.
end to get that kind of recognition. And aside from just his receiving, like he has 4 rushing touchdowns from 23 carries and almost 200 yards. And then he actually was a quarterback in high school, so he has a passing touchdown and I thought this was funny. I was telling Yonnic this a little bit earlier, but he actually has a higher passer rating according to ESPN than both the Penn State quarterback and Kevin Jennings, which is kind of funny. I mean, it's just because he only has 5 attempts, but
Yeah.
I think that's to say he's a very versatile player. And so I'm not going to be surprised if they have special packages where they're just going to try to feed him the ball in whatever way they can. Um, but on the stat sheet, it's interesting. Like, Penn State is the better team offensively and defensively. Their ratings are above SMU, even though SMU is competitive in both categories. But there are some similarities. So I was taking a look at some of the stats, and on the defensive end, SMU and Penn State have the same yards per play average over the season, 4.65 yards per play. Um, and that kind of gives me hope that like if maybe in this game like our defense can step up and really hold them. I do think that Penn State probably has faced better competition throughout the season. So even when we have these tiebreakers, I think I lean a little bit more towards them. But also on the offensive side, like our yards per game are within 5 yards of each other. There's some there's some places where we are very evenly matched, which gives me hope that SMU stands a chance here.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say like I'd say their strength of schedule is better than ours, but that's because they had 2 games against one against Ohio State, one against Oregon. If you took out those 2 games and you took out our top 2 games, I think we would have a stronger schedule. I think our average opponent is better in terms of like, well, week in, week out, our opponent was probably better, except for those 2 weeks. Like you compare Louisville to Oregon. No, I mean Oregon's better than Louisville. You compare, Clemson to Ohio State. Ohio State's better than Clemson. But then if you take, 3 going down, I feel like we have some better ones. I mean, they played Kent State. I think they scored 56 against us. So a lot of their stats are going to be somewhat inflated. Whereas the scores that we ran up, I mean, we ran the score up on a Pitt that was 7-0. And is Pitt really a top 15 team? No. I mean, they weren't a top 15 team. But I mean, were they better than, Wisconsin? Absolutely. So and like that's the only thing is like I do think that um it's going to be a comparable matchup, but I think it's just a bad matchup for SMU. That's my biggest concern is that what's his name? Tyler Warren. Tyler Warren is, I think, a really bad matchup for us. A lot of these, kind of tight end seam routes and just like going up 10 yards and curling back. I think that's just bad for our defense. And I think that they can pick us apart with that. I mean, this kid had a 200 plus yard game against USC. Um, I'm really concerned about it. And Drew Aller was a 5-star quarterback. I don't know if people talk about this anymore, but he was a 5-star quarterback coming out of high school. So, and he's averaging what, like 70% completion. Like he's a very good quarterback. And our secondary at the corners has been suspect all year. They still have like, I mean, Penn State's going to have blue chip talent at the receiver. They're going to have like guys that are fast that can just, you know, maybe able to beat our corners. And so those are kind of like the biggest concerns that I have. I think our defensive line, I think it's going to hold up well. I think that, but I think that when it comes down to it, there's a good chance they start picking us apart in the passing game that I think it'll be hard for us to keep up with. Um,
Yeah.
Drew,
I will
last or
say,
yeah, Ben, last thoughts, and then let's go into predictions.
yeah, I was just gonna say I haven't looked at the numbers, but I think I mean I have a feeling that they're gonna be somewhat similar to Clemson. I think they'll probably have obviously they have a better tight end. They have I don't think their receivers are as good as Clemson's, and I think the quarterbacks are comparable. I think they've both struggled, but also been good at times. I think their defense is probably a lot better than Clemson. But I think we definitely have a chance. I definitely I feel good about our ability to move the ball. And I agree with what you're saying about their schedule. I think they got a very easy schedule in the Big Ten outside of Ohio State. To be fair, we also got a very easy schedule in the ACC. So um, if I had to choose with my head, I would choose Penn State, but I haven't chosen against SMU this year. So if we want to go into predictions, I can go ahead and start. I'm going to pick SMU to win 31-28 because I love my ponies and why not? Let's get it.
All right. I can go next. I do think Penn State is head and shoulders the best team that we've faced all year.
Yeah.
And I think the environment is really going to be what gives them the advantage, even above some of the comparable stats between the two teams. So I do think that Penn State's going to win this. But at the same time, like they have a track record of choking in big time games. And I think if this is, like a 7 or 10 game series, I think SMU is taking a good chunk of those wins. But I just think the environment might be a little bit too much out of our favor. So I'm going to go Penn State. I think it'll be something around like 39-30.
Yeah. I think currently we're what, like a 10-point underdog right now. I can't remember what the line is
I think
right
it's
off the
eight
top
and
of
a
my head.
half.
8.5. Yeah. I don't think that the environment's going to intimidate SMU so much as it's just going to be problematic with how loud the crowd is. We went to Louisville. Louisville's got a great crowd. It's not Penn State, but it's a great crowd to give us some, kind of practice going up against big powerhouse teams in their environment. Same with Clemson. The ACC championship game was absolutely a home game for them. Um, so, I mean, this is just, I think that us going there is just, I just think it's a really bad matchup. I actually think that we're the best team, and that SMU is the best team in Texas. I still stand by that. I said that before the championship game last week, before Texas played Georgia. Um, I think our quarterback's better, and I think SMU's defense is good enough that I think if we played Texas in a neutral site, we'd win. I actually do think that. But I think Penn
Mhm.
State, and I think Texas would beat Penn State, ironically. But I think Penn State's just a really bad matchup for SMU. And so because of that, I'm going to pick, I mean, I'd say Penn State's going to win. Penn State's going to cover. I think they probably win by 10, and it's probably going to be like 31-21. It's not what I want to have, but I mean, SMU's had such a great year, and we're playing on house money. And if we do win, it's going to be because of some heroics from Kevin Jennings and Burchard. I mean,
Yeah.
Burchard's going to have like a,
It
180-yard game type thing, and Kevin Jennings has 3 touchdowns, no
it
interceptions.
can absolutely happen.
And it
Yeah.
absolutely can happen. We would basically need their absolute A games. They cannot have not just a quarter like we had against Clemson. We can't have, you know, 2 bad plays like we can't have 1 touchdown. We can't have 1 interception like that in our own red zone. 1 fumble
Yeah.
in our own red zone. Like we can't do that.
Yeah, we need to win the turnover battle for sure. And Joel, totally forgot that Penn State was coached by James Franklin. James Franklin. So I'm going to change my prediction to 34-28 win because it's going to be the James Franklin special. He's going to find a way to choke the game away. You guys are making great points though. I could see Penn State blowing us out if we have a quarter like we did, and where we don't recover. But I think if we can control the ball and not turn the ball over and get a couple turnovers, I think it'll be a close game, and I think we have a chance down the
Yeah,
stretch to take the win. So
good stuff. Well,
Awesome.
I think we're gonna have to wrap it up here, but
yeah,
yeah, great call, guys, and let's pray and let's cheer on our ponies. I think it's gonna be an awesome game.
yeah, we're excited.
Absolutely.
Thanks
All
for
righty,
joining us.
pony up.
See you guys.
Pony
Let's
up,
go.
guys.